Hello everyone, welcome to the English YouTuber. Today we'll be discussing Advice to Youth, written by Mark Twain. So the tone of the essay here is satirical, and when he was asked to give a moral lecture to young people, he used satire and humor to bring to light that the youth are being sculpted and shaped to societal expectations by authoritative figures. So instead of offering a boring and mundane speech, he uses humor, exaggeration, ridicule, and irony to highlight societal hypocrisy and unrealistic standards set that shape the youth. So, this is the gist of what Advice to Youth is about. Now, let's go to the line by line explanation and then we will discuss the themes towards the end. Being told I would be expected to talk here, I inquired what sort of talk I ought to make. They said it should be something suitable to youth, something didactic, instructive, or something in the nature of good advice. So, when he was asked to give a speech, he asked them what kind of speech or what is the nature of speech that he has to make. So they said it should be suitable to the youth, something didactic. Didactic means intended to teach something with moral values or moral instructions. Then it should be instructive and something in the nature of good advice to the youth. Very well. I have a few things in my mind which I have often longed to say for the instruction of the youth. For it is in one's tender early years that such things will best take root and be most enduring and most valuable. So he's saying from a very long time, he had the longing or the urge to say something to the youth. And he says that the most important stage of development is the youth or the early stage. Because he says that the youth, they are like wet cement or wet clay and they form an impression for life which cements their values, character, habits, and so on. So he decides to share his pearl of wisdom with the youth. First, then, I will say to you, my young friends, and I say it beseechingly, urgently. So, beseechingly means urgently and fervently or begging. So the youthful audience, they anticipate some kind of serious and preachy kind of speech, but it wasn't so. So what is the first thing that he says? Always obey your parents. So that's what everyone says, right? Always obey your parents. But he adds something apart from that, which is when they are present. This is the best policy in the long run because if you don't, they will make you. Most parents think they know better than you, and you can generally make more by humoring that superstition that you can by acting on your own better judgment. So he's saying that the youngsters should obey their parents when they are present. That is, such an approach keeps the parents happy and then allows the children to do what they want behind their backs. So, when the youth they obey their parents when they are present, they avoid conflict, isn't it? And what does Mark Twain also say? That parents always feel that they know better and that they are always right. So, this makes us ponder that there might be situations where they might not know better. That means they might not always be correct. So, there might be situations where youth may have to listen to their inner voice. So, from this paragraph, we get to know that Mark Twain is trying to imply that respect is often a performative gesture rather than something genuine. And many follow rules not out of genuine respect, but it could be because of fear or because of submission to authority. So here Mark Twain is trying to say that most of the authority or parents try to imply their thoughts and beliefs into their children or to the youth, which stifles the individual thinking of the youngsters. And he reminds us that one never has to follow rules and regulations just out of fear or submission, but also listen to their inner voice. I hope the first point is clear. Let's move to the second one. So, what is the next thing that he says? Be respectful to your superiors, if you have any, also to strangers and sometimes to others. If a person offends you and you are in doubt as to whether it was intentional or not, do not resort to extreme measures. Simply watch your chance and hit him with a brick. That will be sufficient. If you shall find that he had not intended any offense, come out frankly and confess yourself in the wrong when you struck him. Acknowledge it like a man and say you did not mean it. Yes, always avoid violence. In this age of charity and kindliness, the time has gone by for such things. Leave dynamite to the low and unrefined. So, here, what is he saying? Sometimes, if someone hurts or offends you, wait for the most favorable or the most perfect moment to strike back. Don't retaliate immediately. Then, if you find out that the insult was accidental, politely apologize and smooth things over. So, here, what lesson does Mark Twain want to teach us? That society promotes being civil, but secretly encourages holding grudges and revenge. So, do not resort to extreme measures, but then hit him with a brick. He's saying being explosive and violent is something outdated or primitive, but use trickery to seek revenge. So here, Mark Twain is critiquing the blind authority that people follow and advises that if a superior or anyone offends you, we should not resort to extreme measures and immediately be explosive and violent, which is meant for the low and unrefined people. But he says that watch your chance and then hit him with a brick. That is, in a very conniving manner, use trickery to seek revenge. So here he is mocking the traditional polite manners where we are asked to respect everyone irrespective of how they hurt us. In the third point, he says, go to bed early, get up early, this is wise. So here Mark Twain is taking a dig at the famous maxim, early to bed, early to rise keeps a man healthy, wealthy and wise. And also the idiom, be up with the lark. That means asking us to get up early. Some authorities say get up with the sun. Some say get up with one thing, others with another. But a lark is really the best thing to get up with. It gives you a splendid reputation with everybody to know that you get up with a lark. And if you get the right kind of lark and work at him right, you can easily train him to get up at 9:30 every time. It's no trick at all. So here, what advice is he giving? He's saying that instead of waking up at dawn, train the lark to get up late, where you will still appear to be disciplined. So here he is mocking societal obsession with an early start, with rigid routines that you have to get up at 4 a.m., you have to get up at 5 a.m., and only then would you be called productive. So by having an early start or have forming a very rigid routine, it's only then that you're being appreciated and called productive. So here Mark Twain says not to worry what people will think, but use your logic and convenience and choose a routine that is apt for you. So I hope so much is clear. Shall we proceed forward? Now, the next point that he's talking about is the matter of lying. So he says, now, as the matter of lying, you want to be very careful about lying. Otherwise, you are nearly sure to get caught. Once caught, you can never again be in the eyes to the good and the pure what you were before. So, what is he saying? That you have to be very careful about lying. And if you get caught, then you will never have a similar standing of what you had before, and you're going to ruin your reputation. Many a young person has injured himself permanently through a single clumsy and ill fated lie, the result of carelessness born of incomplete training. So, here he is saying that lying is a skill, and you'll have to be skilled at it. You have to practice and train to master it. Some authorities hold that the young out not to lie at all. So most of the authorities, what do they say? That the young people, they should never lie. That, of course, is putting it rather stronger than necessary. So here, Mark Twain wants to highlight that the adults are hypocritic, where they ask the youngsters not to lie, and it is immoral, but they twist facts for their gains. So he says that asking the youngsters not to lie at all is putting it rather stronger than necessary. Still, while I cannot go quite so far as that, I do maintain, and I believe I am right, that the young ought to be temperate in the use of this great art until practice and experience shall give them that confidence, elegance, and precision which alone can make the accomplishment graceful and profitable. So he's saying that lying is a skill, and through practice and training, you can master it. So here, Mark Twain advises that while he doesn't advocate for never lying, the youth should be temperate or use it moderately until they gain experience, confidence, and precision. Patience, diligence, painstaking attention to detail. These are the requirements. These in time will make the student perfect. Upon these only may he rely as the sure foundation for future eminence. Eminence is fame or distinction. So he's saying that you have to practice. If you are lying, you have to practice with patience, diligence, and painstaking attention. And in time, you will learn the art of lying, and that is how the authorities are doing it. Think what tedious years of study, thought, practice, experience went to the equipment of that peerless old master who was able to impose upon the whole world the lofty and sounding maxim that truth is mighty and will prevail, the most majestic compound fracture of fact which any of woman born has yet achieved. So here Mark Twain is saying that the very famous maxim that truth is mighty and will prevail is not always true. He says that the art of deception also requires as much dedication as any other skill. And he also challenges the popular notion that truth is inevitable and the easy victory of truth, because he is saying that any woman that has been born has not yet achieved that the truth has come out and it will prevail. So he says that many a times there are situations in history that the truth has remained concealed. For the history of our race and each individual's experience are soon thick with evidences that a truth is not hard to kill and that a lie well told is immortal. So he is saying that we can easily kill the truth, and a lie that is well trained and executed is immortal. Now he gives an illustration to exhibit this. There is Boston, a monument of the man who discovered anesthesia. So there is a monument of a man in Boston who discovered anesthesia. Many people are aware in these latter days that that man didn't discover it at all, but stole the discovery from another man. Is this truth mighty and will it prevail? Ah, no, my hearers. The monument is made of hardy material, but the lie it tells will outlast it a million years. So the man, he lied that he discovered anesthesia, which actually wasn't by him. But here, what is going to happen? The lie, which is now solidified in the form of a monument, will outlast a million years than the truth. An awkward, feeble, leaky lie is a thing which you ought to make it your unceasing study to avoid. So he's saying, avoid an awkward, feeble, leaky lie. Such a lie as that has no more real permanence than an average truth. Why, you might as well tell the truth at once and be done with it. So he is saying that practice honesty. If you can't lie convincingly, because you will be just done with it, you don't have to then face awkward situations, and it is better to avoid it. Why, you might as well tell the truth at once and be done with it. A feeble, stupid, preposterous lie will not live 2 years, except it be a slander upon somebody. So if you lie just because of that stupid, preposterous lie, your reputation will be slandered forever. It is indestructible, then of course, but that is no merit of yours. A final word. Begin your practice of this gracious and beautiful art early. Begin now. If I had begun earlier, I could have learned how. So he's saying if you can't lie convincingly, practice honesty, because your reputation will be at stake, and once your reputation is ruined, then you will never have a similar standing to what you had before. Also, he makes us ponder that it is not possible to tell the truth all the time. So, in such instances, make sure that you say a well convincing lie. So, practice it from a very young age. So, here he also shows that history has shown lies over uncomfortable truth, making deception a powerful tool in shaping people's opinion. So, I hope this was clear. Let's move to the next advice. Never handle firearms carelessly. The sorrow and suffering that have been caused through the innocent but heedless handling of firearms by the young. So he's saying that never handle firearms, that is guns, carelessly, because it has caused immense sorrow and suffering through actually very innocent but heedless handling of the firearms. So he's giving a small story. Only 4 days ago, right in the next farmhouse to the one where I'm spending the summer, a grandmother, old and grey and sweet, one of the loveliest spirits in the land, was sitting at her work. When her young grandson crept in and got down an old, battered, rusty gun which had not been touched for many years and was supposed not to be loaded, and pointed it at her, laughing and threatening to shoot. In her fright, she ran screaming and pleaded towards the door on the other side of the room. But as she passed him, He placed the gun almost against her very breast and pulled the trigger. He had supposed it was not loaded, and he was right, it wasn't. So there wasn't any harm done. It is the only case of that kind I have ever heard of. So here the old lady was lucky that it was not loaded, but this was the only case. So there are other cases in the past where youngsters very innocently for fun have taken firearms and anticipating that it was not loaded have shot people, and unfortunately they have died. So he's asking them to be very careful with such ammunitions. Therefore, just the same, don't you meddle with old unloaded firearms. They are the most deadly and unerring things that have ever been created by man. So he's saying those are the most deadly and they are the most unfailing things that have been created by man. So they don't fail not to hurt you. You don't have to take any pains at all with them. You don't have to have a rest. You don't have to have any sights on the gun. You don't have to take aim even. No, you just pick out a relative and bang away, and you're sure to get him. So, these guns, accidentally, also, it is very easy to kill someone. A youth who can't hit a cathedral at 30 yards with a Gatling gun in 3/4 of an hour can take up an old empty musket and bag his grandmother every time at 100. So he's saying that a youth who cannot aim at a cathedral that is 30 yards away with a Gatling gun can easily kill his old grandmother, even if he takes up an old gun and even accidentally he takes a gun and tries to shoot his grandmother accidentally. Think what Waterloo would have been if one of the armies had been boys armed with old muskets, supposed not to be loaded, and the other army had been composed of their female relations. The very thought of it makes one shudder. So, here Mark Twain wants to say that the youth have a very casual attitude towards firearms and they are very reckless with weapons, which have real consequences. So, weapons in the hands of the untrained only cause destruction. So, if you know, the Battle of Waterloo was a very brutal war with a lot of deaths. And he's saying that if on one side there are boys that are armed with old muskets, supposed not to be loaded, and the other army had been composed of their female relations, the brutality of it will far surpass the actual historical carnage of Waterloo. So he's saying that even unloaded guns are dangerous and caution is always needed. So he wants to tell us that we often fear the wrong things and underestimate common dangers. So we have to be really cautious. The next advice is about books. There are many sort of books, but good ones are the sort for the young to read. Remember that they are a great and inestimable and unspeakable means of improvement. Therefore, be careful in your selection. My young friends, be very careful. Confine yourself exclusively to Robertson's sermons, Baxter's Saints' Rest, The Innocents Abroad, and works of that kind. So he is telling that read more thought provoking literature to replenish the stock of knowledge. Because by reading such books that he has mentioned here, you can improve yourself. And The Innocents Abroad is actually written by Mark Twain. So he says that the society is usually controlling the young minds and they share only safe books or boring books for the youngsters to absorb in their mind. And they discourage creative and thought provoking ones. So he says that prevent intellectual stifling and enforce conformity, but read challenging books that are thought provoking rather than books that are safe. And now, finally, he says that, but I have said enough. I hope you will treasure up the instructions which I have given you and make them a guide to your feet and a light to your understanding. Build your character thoughtfully and painstakingly upon these precepts. And by when you have got it built, you will be surprised and gratified to see how nicely and sharply it resembles everybody else. So here he is saying that I hope whatever I have said guides you to be a better person. But again, he uses irony and mocks that society exists precisely on sameness and lack of uniqueness, and they are trying to control you and prevent you from standing out in the crowd. So he tells us to balance about what others say and what you feel about yourself. He says that the world is not interested in nurturing unique individuals and free will, but rather to conform to rules and be obedient. And what do precepts mean? Precepts are general rules that are intended to regulate behavior or thought. So, through this essay, he has exposed the flaws of adults and their behavior. So, this essay encourages the youth to see beyond appearances, seek honesty and authenticity, trust their instincts and judgment rather than conform blindly to authority or adults. So I hope this was clear. Now, shall we move to the themes that are in this essay? So, the first theme is hypocrisy of adults. The story elicits the hypocrisy often displayed by adults about how adults set moral standards for the youth that they themselves do not follow. Through irony and sarcasm, he shows the double standards that they portray, especially in matters such as truth telling, violence, and good habits. This theme teaches the youth to examine advice critically, recognizing that the authority or adults may not always model the ideals they promote and to have their own sense of reasoning. That's the first theme. The second is obedience and authority. The author portrays throughout the story how authority and adults teach youngsters blind obedience and conformity. On the one hand, where society promotes being civil, they themselves secretly hold grudges and seek revenge. Therefore, shedding light on the dichotomy between perception and reality. How it is not necessary to follow the parents' doctrines all the time over the younger's ideology. The next is importance of critical thinking and individualism. Mark Twain emphasizes that just because the adults and authority believe that they are always right, it needn't be so. Therefore, the youth have to also listen to their inner voice and critically examine situations rather than blindly accepting the instructions that they provide. Therefore, he encourages them to challenge societal norms and conventional wisdom that is bestowed to them. The next one is being nonchalant and having autonomy. The author emphasizes that one does not have to wake up early or follow similar rules just because the larger part of the society follows a rigid routine. Therefore, the author mocks the society's obsession with certain rigid structures and asks the youth to only follow what they are comfortable with and choose a routine that is apt for them. So, having autonomy and being nonchalant, they don't have to follow something just because the entire um, nation or the entire society is following it. The next is attitude towards firearms. The author rightly pinpoints the casual attitude that the youth have towards firearms and how one must not be reckless with weapons as they can have deadly consequences. So we should never underestimate the common dangers and stay vigilant throughout. The last is prevent intellectual stifling. So, the society may control the minds of the youth by only providing safe and boring books. Therefore, the youth have to read thought provoking literature to replenish the stock of knowledge and prevent intellectual stifling and enforced conformity. Therefore, the books here stand for independence and the search for truth and urges them to see beyond appearances because sometimes appearances can be deceptive. So, this is the end of this video, and I hope you really enjoyed watching the explanation. Please share it among your friends, and if you haven't subscribed, do that immediately. Thank you, and God bless.